Welcome to This Week from the Principal's Desk, a podcast about Christian schools and their leadership. This podcast is hosted by two Christian school leaders. My name is Rob Lunak, and I'm the superintendent of Lutheran Neighborhood Schools in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
And my name is Mike Sheeman, and I'm principal at Bethany Lutheran School in Parma, Ohio. And today, Rob and I want to dive back into to the topic that we talked about last time. We kept saying last time that this is really part one. Well, rather than give a gap, we're going to dive into part two. So we were talking about difficult parents and how do you deal with parents when they come at you with only the good Lord knows what, and all the ways that they might be able to do that. You know, parents that are upset about something that happened at school, a situation, how you responded, a communication. It could be a whole myriad of things. But we know that our goal is not just to serve the kids, but it's to serve the families as well, which includes the parents. So we were talking last time a little bit about partnering with the parents. How do you listen to them? How do you hear them through? But today we thought we might dive into maybe a little more on the logistical side of things. How do you have that conversation? Because sometimes they're tough conversations to have. I'm sure anybody listening to this can picture one really difficult conversation that you had to have with a parent. I can also picture times when I've tried to avoid those difficult conversations with the parents. That goes a lot worse every time, because if you avoid a difficult conversation with a parent, that situation continues to brew. There's a lack of resolution there, and the parents will start to fill in whatever missing information is there. They'll fill that in with information that they've created, and it's usually a lot worse, or it's a lot different. It's not authentic. So avoiding a conversation is the most difficult thing that you can do. Having a conversation is the second least difficult thing you can do, most difficult thing. Because it's hard. It's hard to engage with somebody when you already know that they're passionate or they're hot about the topic. So when I say visualize a conversation that you've had with somebody, literally, I mean that. Think about it in your mind and start thinking about some of the logistics. Where did that conversation take place? Now, for me, the ones that I have, I've got an office with a conference table in it, and 9 times out of 10, I'm saying, well, why don't we meet in my office? But I have to think about that before they even come into the office. Where are we going to sit? Am I sitting on the same side of the table as they are in order to create what looks like a collaborative environment? Do I need to be on the opposite side of the table to have a little bit more of an authoritative approach to that? What does that look like? And the other thing that hopefully you don't have to think of very often, but it is good to consider, is who sits closest to the door. Now, hopefully you never get to that point where you have a conversation that gets absolutely crazy to the point where you leave, but I actually always sit in the seat that's closest to my door. That way, if things go wrong, I can just get up and walk out. I've got the immediate exit to the room, and then they're left in there. Again, that sounds really negative to be thinking that way, but at the same time, you want to prepare for this in any way that it could go. The expectation is that it goes well. The expectation is that you're going to be able to work with a parent, resolve things with the parent. So that's first off the kind of where of the conversation. Now, we'll go through probably all 5 of the W questions, but Rob, tell me a little bit about the one you're picturing right now, or where do you have conversations with parents? How does that go? Is it an office? Is it a hallway? Is it the parking lot? What do you like to do?
Yeah, so your office is like home base, and you have a couple home team advantages to being in your office. You know where everything is, you can set everything up the way you want, you can pick the seats, and I will always have a couple chairs like right across from my desk, and sometimes I'll sit in my desk and I'll put them in, I'll give them the opportunity to sit in the chair. Sometimes I'll move behind from my desk. It really depends on what's going on, because every once in a while you need to position yourself as the authority figure, and that means you got to sit behind the desk, right? And if you're positioning yourself that way, you also run the meeting very differently, in my experience. Whereas if I'm coming out from behind the desk and sitting next to somebody, or sitting, I had a couch in one of my offices, I'd sit, on the couch, and they'd sit in a chair. I'd offer them the couch and I'd sit in the chair, right? And we'd talk. And once you figure out where you're going to have the meeting, that helps you figure out how you're going to have that meeting. Is this going to be a listening session? Is this going to be, thank you for coming in, here's my decision, we're not taking comments at this time, right? Sometimes you have those too, where it's not a debate and it's not a what do you want, it's a this is what's happening right now. One of the things I will say, if I have to deliver bad news to a parent, like maybe it's a suspension meeting or an expulsion meeting or some heavy topic like that, it's going to sound really counterintuitive, but I generally won't ask them how they're doing because they know why they're coming in. And they're doing terribly, honestly. And so I'll skip that question and I'll just say, thank you for coming in. I'm going to open with prayer if you don't mind. And then I pray. And then if I have bad news, I will say, I have some bad news. I'll take a beat and then I will deliver it to them. And I will give it to them as convenient, not as conveniently, as tiny package as possible. I'm not going to be wordy. Here's the decision. And then I say nothing. And a lot of the time, the parents will take it and they'll digest it and they'll say, thank you, and they leave, right? Sometimes it doesn't go that way and they have questions or they're mad about the decision or, and then you got to be ready for that. What you don't want to do is not be prepared for what happens after you deliver the news or after you start the meeting. We plan how to start our meeting, where we're going to sit, what I'm going to say, how the prayer is going to go. And if we haven't thought through the next step, well, now we're kind of like, what do we do now? Do I want to talk about this? Do I talk about this? Do I move the direction over here? Maybe the conversation should be about X thing. And so you need to figure out kind of all of those steps, and visualizing it is helpful, but I will write an outline out on like an index card and I'll write down like prayer thing, we're going to talk about this topic, questions, resolution, right? Just bare notes for me. So then I also have something to refer to, because when a parent is just laying into you, sometimes you need another place to look that's not your clock. And if you look at your clock, they're going to get worse. They're going to get really angry. So you can look at your notes and they're like, what are you doing? And you're like, I'm checking out my notes. I want to make sure we're staying on topic. That's all you got to say. And so you've set up the space, you've started your meeting. We talked through some of these tips last time too, right? So now you've had this conversation. What are the other details or other minutia that we need to talk about here, Mike?
Well, okay, I'm going to back up to something you just said, because I do something very strategic. I know exactly where the parents are going to sit in my office. I put a clock behind them so that as I'm
That's great.
looking, I can see the time, because I think it is important to track a little bit of that, because if it's a hard topic, sometimes administrators can start to ramble and be like, no, we don't need to say all those things. We just need to focus on this main topic and then get out. And it can be a quick meeting. Other times the parents might start to ramble, and it's okay. I believe it's okay to say, you know what, I'm so sorry. I have another meeting. I need to get to. I have something else. But also, if you know the time, like, the one thing you don't want to do is sacrifice your own family time or your boundaries to have a meeting with a parent that's going to go on and on and on, which leads into another kind of detail aspect of when do you have difficult conversations. I really don't like to do it to say, well, why don't you drop your kid off at school and then come on into my office and then we can chat. I don't like doing it at drop off, because the parent then has all day to stew over it. Are they going to take the kid out of school? Somehow is it going to get to the kid and affect their day? It's like there's too much going on there. I don't mind doing these at the end of the day after school lets out. But that's where it's like, I have to guard that time. Otherwise, the parent's going to want to talk over and over and over. But here's a tricky one. And I don't know that I have the answer to this, but I've had parents say, I'm just going to record this conversation. I'm going to put my phone in the middle of the table and I'm just going to take a recording of this conversation. I've also seen administrators that have wanted to do that too. Okay, I'm going to start with you, Rob. Do you think conversations like that should or should not be recorded, and why?
If it's something involving discipline, involving another student that they're going to name, I will tell them, I actually can't have you record this for the privacy of that other student. If you want to have a meeting where their parent is involved and then you want to record it, that's fine. But I can't give you that permission because I can't speak for that other child or their parents. And if you say, well, no, they said it's fine, I said, great, then we will reschedule this when they can be here. I just want to make sure I cover all my bases and respect that. If it doesn't involve that, as long as it doesn't involve any sensitive information that I wouldn't want anyone else to listen to, that doesn't involve just their kid or their interaction, I'll say, yeah, that's great. I'm just going to record it too, just in case. We'll have 2 copies then, right? And sometimes saying I'm going to record it too makes them not want to record it anymore, because they might have had an ulterior motive. And now that there's 2 copies and one they don't control, they're less interested in it. Every once in a while, they'll say, yeah, for sure, great. Now, you do need to think about, and as leaders, this stuff does come up, litigious parents. I'm gonna go to my lawyer with this. My response to that is always, I don't talk to lawyers. Lawyers talk to lawyers. And if you would like to talk to your lawyer about this conversation, you're free to do that. However, I'm not going to talk to your lawyer about this conversation. I'll talk to my lawyer. My lawyer will talk to your lawyer. That gets really expensive. I don't think it needs to go there. You're free to do that. It's a free country, right? Just, I wouldn't recommend it. The other thing is I'll hear, well, I'm going to go to the news with this. You are free to do that. You totally can. I will say that I've never been in a situation where that has made sense for parents because I haven't been in a situation where we've been on the wrong end of it, right? It's been their kid. They're just unhappy about it. They want to go to the news. And I'm like, they are free to come talk to me, but I don't think the news is going to take this the way you think they will. And sometimes that comment is better left unsaid because they're bluffing, right? They're stomping their feet and they want their own way. And sometimes the recording can be a little bit of that. It
Mhm.
can try to be getting you on your toes to get some resolution out of it. Now, not always, but sometimes. Mike,
Mhm.
has that been your experience?
Yeah, I love the double recording thing. I think that's brilliant. I haven't done that, but I might next time. For me, typically, and I don't think that there's a right or wrong way to deal with this, and maybe there's a lawyer listening that needs to correct me on that, and please do. But I almost there was one scenario I had where a parent wanted to record a conversation they were going to have with me, and I said no, and the parent got upset about that, and I said, I'm sorry, I'm not comfortable having this conversation recorded. Well, that's because you're going to say mean things, you're going to say bad things. Like, no, I just don't want my words to be, take anything can be spliced, it can be taken out of context. But if you would prefer to have a third person in this meeting, I would be more than happy to reschedule where I can invite my board chair to join us, or I can invite another teacher to join us, or somebody else. And then in that case, the parent said yes, but they said, "Well, then I'm bringing somebody too." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's totally fine. You can more than happy." And then we'll both have people there, and we can make sure that this conversation stays on topic. But it's also a godly conversation that makes sure that that we're holding each other to the regard that we want to do that. So, yeah, recording it can definitely be tricky. Um, but I will say people can splice and edit recordings. I mean, we
I
see it.
can. I have you saying so many words. I could
Oh my
make you
goodness.
say anything, Mike.
You probably could. You probably could. And it's hard to refute, if, well, this is what he said. No, I didn't. Well, here's his voice. Uh, you know, it can get expensive to prove that you spliced all that together, and who's the burden of proof on there. So there's legal implications.
Well, and that brings up another interesting point that I think we didn't need to talk about 2 years ago. And that is if somebody has a sample of your voice recorded, they can feed it into AI and make you say anything they want. That's
Hmm.
relatively easy to have happen now. And oh gosh, that's kind of scary. I think you get enough, like we're public figures. We are. There are enough pictures of us and recordings of us out there that if somebody wanted to doctor something, it's now way easier to do.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know what the solution is, and I don't think we're going to touch that any more than just like there's some nightmare fuel for you, and we we can get back on topic.
Yeah, that is nightmare fuel. I think there's going to be certain things where we will not be able to protect against it. That's just the bottom line. And so I just rest assured that I'm doing the Lord's work, and where I know AI might not have my back, I know that Jesus does. And so, I can walk confidently through that. That's part of being an administrator too, right? You're going to get more difficult arrows that are thrown your way than when you were a teacher in the classroom. And it's something where you have to have thick skin, and it's hard. There's days where it is hard. There's days where I'm like, I don't want this job anymore. I don't want to be doing this anymore. But then I keep reminding myself, well, it's not about what I want, it's about what God called me to do. And when God issued this call to me to be where I am, he also said, I am with you always to the very end of the age. So that's definitely somewhere you can put your trust. Um, Rob, you went through kind of a list of what parents can sometimes do. They can go to the news, they can go to the lawyer. I'm going to add one to your list and actually give an example. They can go to social media. And we did have a scenario here at Bethany a little while ago and there was something going on, and there was a parent that completely misunderstood what happened. Now, at the time, of course, their misunderstanding was their reality. We didn't know that there was a misunderstanding, but they went to social media and they put on, oh, just a lovely, lovely post regarding our school and named a teacher. And it was just like, oh my goodness. So, of course, I saw it. There were some comments that were coming on it, and some of the comments actually from parents saying, wow, I haven't had that experience. I'm kind of surprised. As soon as I saw it, I picked up the phone, and I wasn't the initial point of contact. It was dealing with another staff member. So I picked up the phone and I called them, and they said, "Yeah, I can't believe this happened," and they were hot about it. And I just said, can I offer that I talked to that staff member too, and I got a completely different perspective on what happened. Do you think we could maybe sit down and I would love just to make like clear the air on this? They're like, yeah, for sure. Because they were really upset, but they loved our school too. So they came in, we had a conversation. We did. They completely misunderstood. They realized it. We totally cleared the air. And at the end of that meeting, I did say, now I have one more favor. Since we did clear up this misunderstanding, would you mind taking down that post because it does kind of have a negative view on our school? And right away she said, absolutely, that's no problem at all. Yeah, sorry about that. And the post came down along with all of the comments that were attached to that post. So I think it's okay. One of the hard conversations that you can have with a parent is to say, would you please take down this post? Now, freedom of speech, they certainly don't have to. They can put whatever they want out there. I don't typically worry too much about social media because I read what some of my friends write too, and I'm like, yeah, that's that crazy person from that crazy state where it's like, yeah, what they say is nuts
You saw
anyway.
my post?
And well, I was gonna talk about that after the podcast. um, but I feel like, people put out there whatever they want to, whatever they want, and generally the people that write the more crazy things, they expect that of them or whatever. And so you take it all with a grain of salt. That's the bottom line. And so, if there's stuff up there about the school, I don't worry too much about it. At the same time, if it starts to really fester, if it starts to become a bigger mountain than really what it needs to be, yeah, give them a call. We're just human beings walking this road together. Let's just call and talk about it. And if they call, if you call and they talk, you could win somebody over, and that could be a really good thing. The worst thing that's going to happen is that they're just going to get upset, leave it there, and you move on. And eventually that post becomes, so high up in a thread that nobody can see it anymore, and it goes away. It takes
Yeah.
time, but it goes away.
And you should have a policy about some of this, regulating
Yes.
families. Like when you sign up to send your kid to our school, you agree to support the school publicly and not disparage the school by name, right? You can put that in your handbook. You can. Now,
Easily.
whether or not that's enforceable or not, well, them going to your school could be contingent on them adhering to that. Like you're not the government, you can't encroach on anybody's free speech. So if they say, "Well, I have free speech," yeah, with the United States government, not with my Lutheran school. Like that's not your free speech doesn't actually fly here like that. Not the way you think it does. And that's not a bad thing to have. Now, where the posts get a little tricky is if they have a little nugget of truth in them. And a lot of the time they do. Now, people are going to twist that, but there's something in there that you can't refute, generally. Sometimes people put something out there that's absolutely in no way connected to reality. And I know we hear the saying, well, it's their reality. Well, no, reality is reality. And their reality is sometimes the ramblings of something, right? And I don't want to make it sound like parents are crazy. They're not, right? But when it comes to social media, I think people do lose their heads a little bit. People put things on social media that they would never say to somebody's face. Like that person wouldn't stand up at chapel and say these things, hopefully. But they'll put it out there and their friends will sympathize with it and whatever. Now this goes back to the thick skin thing you talked about earlier. Sometimes people are going to have their opinion and there may be a kernel of truth to it. It may be totally wrong. And you just got to take that and move on. And like we tell our kids, like does it matter what this person thinks about you? Not really. Did those words hurt your feelings? Sure. Are you going to live? Yeah. Do you got to move on? Uh-huh. And you as leader need to do that way more than everybody else because you'll take it all personally. You will. Well, this was a terrible job. I think the school's this. I didn't like how the teacher did that. And you feel all those things. And you want to go, well, that's not fair. And you want to fight for your teachers and fight for your school and fight for you. And that very rarely helps. Sometimes you just got to let it go. Hey, you're entitled to your opinion. I totally disagree. Or sometimes I'll just say, thank you for telling me. Nothing else. Well, aren't you sorry? Aren't you? I'm like, thanks for telling me. And I'll just repeat that. Thanks for telling me. Is that all you're going to say? Thanks for telling me. Right. And they'll leave. They'll get frustrated and they're out of there. And sometimes that happens. Okay, so we've talked about that. Are there times when you're not going to take a meeting? And how do you decide that? Are there times when a parent's going to call you with something and you're going to go, yeah, we're not actually going to discuss that? Or maybe you had a meeting and they want another meeting, right? Whatever it is. Mike, do you ever have times where you tell a parent, yeah, this isn't actually something we're going to talk about?
Yes. Quite frankly, I feel that for me, I'll always talk to people, like talk to parents, no problem. When I get to that point where I won't take a meeting is because of what you said at the end of your question is we've already made a decision. We have already discussed this many, many times. There's no new information there, or there's nothing that you could bring forward that would cause a change because I'm following policy or I'm doing something that I can't control. There are parents that just like to do that. They just like to have the ear of the principal constantly. And just like, if we've already talked about this, I'm going to respect your time. I'm going to ask you to respect mine. And unfortunately, nothing that we say is going to make a change in this particular way. Honestly, that's only happened to me once or twice. Very, very seldom do you get to that point where you're like, I'm not going to talk to you. There are times, though, I mean, hey, I'm a human too. There's times where it's like, I'm not going to talk to you today because I need to know my filter is working between my brain and my mouth. And it's just one of those things where it's like I can get hot about a topic too. And I can be upset with a parent. It can go the other way, right? That you need to address a parent because you're upset with them. But I need to make sure that first off, I've had time to pray about it and that I've had time to really process what it is I'm going to say. And at the beginning of this podcast, we said we wanted to talk about the W's. We've talked about like who's in the conversation, where are you going to have it, when are you going to have it, what's it going to be about, but why? Why are you going to have a conversation with somebody? And I always believe it's to strengthen the partnership and really to support the child, right? And I mean, my life would be totally fulfilled if I didn't have to talk to you about how you didn't like the ref at the basketball game last night. I don't care. But I care about your kid. And we're doing this together. It takes a village to raise a child. And because this is now a problem for you, I want to join you in that. And um, I want to be in the mud with you so that we can work to resolve this together so that you feel validated and heard and resolved. And so do I. So I always like to make sure I'm very clear on the why. And the why is always because I love Jesus and because I love your child. And if I'm not there in that headspace, that would be a reason I would say I'm not interested in having this conversation right now. You do need to circle back though, and because that conversation again, you don't want to let it fester too long because that's when they will say he's avoiding, he's blah blah blah, whatever. But it's okay to just be like, I need to breathe. Ultimately, I need to pray. So if you can go in though, and even feel free to express your why at the beginning of this conversation, hey, we're gonna have it. I know we need to talk about this, but my goal is that by the time we're done, we walk out of here going, I understand the whole situation. I feel like I've been heard. I feel like there's a resolution either now or one that's coming, and that we have strengthened our relationship together. So to say things like that at the beginning of the conversation tells parents you're in a good headspace and you're really ready to listen. And if you can't genuinely make that comment, then I would challenge you to say, wait until you can. There are times where you're not given that grace. This conversation can't wait. You're not in the position to have it, and you have to have it anyway. Those are hard ones. Those are hard ones. But in that one, I have a mantra that goes through my head. Don't promise them anything. Don't promise them anything. Don't promise them anything. Because the second you say something they might latch on to, and you might have said it in a heat of anger. You might have said it without the authority to do what you promised to do. So a lot of it can simply be like, like you've been saying, Rob, is like, well, let me think about that. I need time. I need time to think about it. So I don't know. I feel like that kind of hits some of maybe the nuts and bolts of those conversations. Rob, is there anything you think that we missed in covering that?
This isn't one of those. I don't want to start a part three, but this is something we could talk about forever. So
Yeah.
stay tuned. We might have a part three, or Mike and I might just make like a cheat sheet that we'll post up on the Google Drive for people because I think there's some more here, and maybe we could break it down into specific topics. As with everything leadership, there's always something new. There's always a situation you've never dealt with. There's always a conversation you never thought you'd have to have, and yet there it is. So I think we're probably at a pretty good spot to stop, though.
Yeah, for sure. And I really hope that this little two-part podcast here didn't really make anybody think that life is all negative. Being an administrator is actually a true position of joy. It really is. I think, it's important to dive into these topics where it can be moments of headaches, but I'm just trying to think, like, how many hard conversations do I have in a week, in a month, in the course of the school year? I always say in the course of the school year, I'm going to have two monster things that I have to deal with that I can't see coming, that I'm not going to enjoy. Two. There's what, 170 days, 180
Hmm.
days of kids. Two is great. So honestly, it's a great position. It really is. And I love everything about being an administrator. Um, so don't let this get you down. Hopefully, it's just some strategies, some things you can think of so that when you do have to have a hard conversation, you feel equipped. So, Rob, do you want to close us off in prayer today?
Yeah, I'd love to.
All right.
Dear Lord, thank you for today. Thank you for our schools and the people that serve in them. Thank you for our families and their children. Thank you for our communities. Thank you for the gift of communication. Please be with us as we have conversations, both easy and difficult. Be with us as we have conversations, both sad and joyful. Be with us through all of our communicating and allow us to communicate through the example you've taught us through your Son. And it's in his name we pray. Amen.
Amen.